So hello from Green-Mopeds in London. So today we are taking out a bike that's coming out in the new year, which is called the Evoke Classic. For those of you who've been around a while will say, well, this bike's here already, and in fact it was. When we first started back in 2017, I think just after that, the Evoke was around, and it was being imported, or was going to be imported, by the same people who brought the Super Soccos in. And in fact, if you Google Evoke motorcycles now, you will see that it's still referenced on their website, even though they aren't the importer anymore. But anyway, this has now got a new importer. They're looking around for dealers, and we thought we'd have a look at it. And the reasons why we would have a look at it should become self-evident as we go around the bike. But just to tell you a little bit about the company, so Evoke are out of China, Beijing to be precise. They are already talking about, they have customers and partnerships and dealerships in many countries outside of China. So UK is just an addition to their presence in the world. They haven't been around too long, which might have been why they didn't get too far back in 2017, because I think they'd only really just started about a year or so before, and I think the bikes that they sent over were probably pre-production models. And in fact, that pre-production bike, is still sitting up at V-Moto in Lincolnshire. But we've got the only two in the country right now, apart from that, I think. So there are two bikes in this series, which is this one, a Classic, as you can see, and then something called an S. There's also a new range coming out, which I think they're calling the 6000 series, but they're not around right now, or available, so I'm not sure when they'll be coming over. But the reason why we would take a bike like this is, as we've said before, we try and fill some gaps in our lineup, and this is obviously sort of, for us, it's sort of like at the top end of what we're going to do. But the gap it's filling is between something like a TC Max and the CR6 from Horwin, and then the next motorbike style electric bike that's in large scale. It's in large scale delivery and of presence in the UK, which of course is Zero. As we go around the bike, you'll probably understand exactly why we've taken this bike now then, because if you just look at bikes, the bike price alone, okay, so we don't normally start off with price, but this bike fits in between a CR6, a TC Max. So a TC Max is 4,300, let's say, a CR6 is 5,000. Then you've got not a lot up until the Zeros, and a Zero, because this does fit into the 11 kilowatt Zero territory in terms of power, you're talking about £12,000, something like that. So clearly there's a big jump from the 4,000 or 5,000 on a TC Max or CR6 to a Zero, and this is a bike that fits in there from a price perspective, also from a performance perspective. So in case you don't know how it works, a bike that is less than 11 kilowatts continuous but greater than 28 miles an hour is basically still a 125cc license. Okay, so Zero do 3 bikes, and they call them the 11 kilowatt versions, that fall into that. So there's a FXE, an S and a DS. You can get them all in a 125cc license, which is obviously good. They all do 70-80 miles an hour. You can add on tanks and all that sort of stuff, but they are still classed as a 125cc bike, L3E. This one is too, because it's got 10.4 kilowatts of continuous power. The upper limit isn't really an issue, but obviously the sort of physics of it becomes an issue. But the upper limit of this bike in terms of maximum power is 20 kilowatts. Okay, so if you think about that, a TC Max 5 kilowatts, the zeros are up there, 20 odd kilowatts, etc, etc, but compared to something like a TC Max or a CR6, then this is a lot more powerful in terms of the top end. Well, in terms of any end actually. In terms of base power, it's obviously more as well. Continuous power. So 10.4 kilowatts is obviously a lot more than a TC Max or a CR6. But we are sort of veering into zero territory from a performance perspective, but not from a price perspective. Okay, so the estimated price of this, and it will be on the grant, so it will have the 3-year warranty on the battery, it will have the 2-year warranty on the bike. After the grant, they're looking at about 7,000. Okay, so it's okay. You could argue it's £2,700 more than a TC Max, 2,000 more than a CR6, but this bike can do. Well, they're saying 80 miles an hour. We're going to try to get somewhere up there. We obviously won't do 80 miles an hour, but it should have that sort of performance. So there are a couple of fundamental differences though between this and any of those other bikes, and that is it is hub motor still. So we talked about this before, that usually when you get to the more powerful bikes, you run out of either wheel size or there's a lot of weight put on the back end that you move to a centrally mounted motor. Okay, so all of the zeros are like that, CR6 is like that, CC Max is like that. They've all gone from being a hub motor, like you'd get in a Super Socko TSX or a Super Socko TC, the hub motor, so the wheel contains the motor, to centrally mounted. But this one is still a hub motor. Okay, if you look at the bike, you will say, yep, it's bigger, and some people have said, look at the rear wheel. For a 125cc rear wheel, it's got a profile of 180. It's huge, relatively. But the reason it's got such a huge back wheel and back tyre is it has to fit a hub motor in it that has that sort of power in it. Okay, and if you actually measured the diameter, the width of that hub motor, you would see it's 6 inches across. Okay, so they've got to therefore build a wheel that will take 6-inch motors width-wise and not move to a centrally mounted one. Okay, so if you know your hub motors, you'll know that there are companies out there like QS. They do sort of big, powerful hub motors, and I'm not sure if this one is a QS motor, or it might be their own developed one. But you look at the rear tyre on this and you're like, why is it so big for a 125cc equivalent? And that's the reason. The motor is basically deciding on the diameter or the width, or profile of the rear wheel. Okay, there's still 17-inch wheels like you get on a TC Max and a CR6, but because of the motor, especially the back one, it's a lot wider. The front one is fairly normal, 110 I think is the profile on that, so nothing there, but yeah, you look at this rear tyre and you'll think that's a bit of an overkill for something that is a 125cc, but it's all down to how much wheel size they need to put in a hub motor. So it's interesting also because for efficiency, the hub motor is the most efficient, more so than an electric motor tied to a chain, tied to a belt, or and then driving a rear wheel through a cog or sprocket or something like that, because it's direct drive. You're taking battery power, feeding it through a controller directly to the motor. So Evoke say that this thing is still 90% efficient, and hub motors in general are like that, but a chain or a belt driven one almost by definition can't be, because you're transferring power through something else and it's making a bit of noise and there's a bit of heat being created and stuff like that. Okay, so that's one of the things that sort of sets it apart. One of the other things that's different is down here, as you see, I have no rear brake lever, so it's down on my right foot, like a quote unquote normal motorbike or a CR6. Okay, so again, I don't know why they chose to do that. Maybe it's pandering to the traditionalists, but it is a grabby rear brake. I can tell you, when you when you choose to use it, it is quite sharp. At the front, it's got dual discs, front, left and right. Okay, it talks about Regen in the manual. It talks about adaptive Regen. Maybe this is a previous model, but I can't see how to adapt Regen or adjust Regen. And as I said, or as I should say, this is not trying to be a zero. It's the quality wouldn't be as good or isn't as good. It's not going to have all the bells and whistles of a zero in terms of all of that sort of stuff on that you can adjust and everything like that. It is still a 3.3 kilowatt fast charge. So this is when you get this bike, you'll get one of those 5-pin T2 adapters with at the other end a normal 13 amp plug. Okay, so you can charge it. They say they can get from I think it is 30 to 80% in something like 60 minutes or something like that. So if you're wanting to stop for lunch, you can be pretty sure that you're going to get the bike charged while you're doing that. It is a lot heavier than either a CR6 or a TC Max. So we're talking about 179 kilos. And basically the reason for that is everything under this tank is battery. Okay, so if you looked at a CR6, you'd have a little lid under the tank here. You'd lift it up and you'd see, a little cubby hole. You can put the charging cord in it, etc., etc. There is no storage at all under this bike. You can take off the back seat and you might get a matchbox under it, but there is no storage. And if you look at the side view of this bike, you'll see that it's basically battery. They're talking about 102 amp hour battery, which is an awful lot. And they're claiming a rather fanciful 200 kilometer range, but at like 20 miles an hour. Okay, a more realistic charge is likely to be sort of like 50 or 60. And while we're stationary here, you can see the charge indicator here, battery charge indicator. That is, there are tenths there. So they say that a best case, if you were doing the slowest speed, each of those is 25 kilometers. So we've just gone through one already, although this wasn't fully charged, I'll admit. But it'll be interesting to see what we do get. So you've got a colour screen, you can see voltage, amps there, and tachometer basically, and then speed. As I say, in theory there is a way to get into a menu system to change the Regen, but I'm not sure that's active on this bike. They also talk about firmware updates. So a little bit like, well, I guess Super Soccer do it as well, but They do have the ability to do firmware updates on this bike. Probably not, well, they haven't got an app, so I was going to say it's not like an NIU firmware update. You almost certainly plug something in. Okay, so yeah, it's 179 kilos, so it's hefty. That's 2 of me. Fixed battery, I guess, is something that I guess the TC Max has an advantage, but the TC Max is going to do 60. This is going to do over 70 in theory. Okay, so the other thing to say about the battery is actually it's not 18650s. So again, if you're looking into this stuff, then what you probably would have seen is a lot of talk about 18650 cells, which are basically 2-volt little lithium-ion batteries, ones that you see in the shops basically, but lots of them. Now this bike has gone away from that, and it has gone to the pouch or matchbox sort of shaped batteries. This is the first bike that we do that has that, but it's not that unusual. Motor cars do this. Lots of cars have these sort of square batteries. There is an argument for better heat dissipation on the sort of cylindrical shape over the square shape, and you can see that. But it's just that they've decided that that's the way they're going to do it. Okay, I guess at the end of the day, you could look into the chemistry of which one's more efficient and all that sort of thing, but in theory the proof is in how the bike rides and its range, right? So there are many cars that use this sort of battery form factor, so again, I wouldn't be, it's not like they've just invented something new. Okay. There are 2 modes, and we're just about to see where we get to on the modes. I have noticed already that if you put it into out of city into sport mode, the acceleration is greater. Obviously that's going to be at the expense of range, but we will see how we get on as we take it down the A3 for a junction. See what happens there. We will stop and we will do a 0 to, let's say 0 to 70. Okay, so here we go. We're in city, remember, so we're not, and we're going uphill. So it looks like this is going to do 50 something in first, 54, 55. Okay, so 55 in city mode with 9/10 battery. Okay, so as you can see, hub motor, no noise. Hopefully you can still hear me, but the only noise is the wind. There is nothing out of this bike, which I guess is a little bit unusual for something that's whizzing along at 50 miles an hour, not making any noise. Okay, so that's the first thing. You get to change modes here, and as you can see straight away, off we go up to 65, 66, 68, and that's 70. Okay, so very easy to get there by the looks of it, and it obviously could have gone further. I don't really want to record myself breaking the speed limit, but yeah, so no issues in going that fast, and it's picking up pretty good. 68, 69, 70. Okay, so happy to cruise along at 70, I would say. We will, as I said, take it off the next junction and then come back just to show you. I don't doubt for a minute it's going to go nearer 80 in the way that it just got to 70 so easily. And the ride, you know, silent, smooth, quiet. What's not to like, I suppose. And the tyres should give you pretty good confidence in that this is going to ride well in most conditions. A lot of people do change their tyres to known brands, let's say, just because they haven't heard of whatever brand is on these bikes. Okay, these are still enforced radials, so shouldn't worry too much about that. Alright. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll come off at this next junction and then see what happens on the way back in terms of acceleration. Alright. Back in a minute. Okay, so some other things I've noticed. So there is regen, and it's passive regen. So down here you'll see, and we'll probably show you this when we come off, this part of the dash is how much regen you're getting, and it is quite pronounced, I have to say. I just took my foot off the accelerator, and so the graph is going up there for consumption of amps, and then down here for feeding back regen. Okay, so it has got regen. Don't see the configuration part of it, but that's a different story. Okay, so you are, according to the book, getting between 5 and 15% back, and that's probably why it's quite aggressive. But it does have it. So for those of you who want to regain some energy, then this is good. All right. So what we'll do now is we'll do what we normally do, and we'll put the times up when we get to various speeds. I guess we'll do 0 to 70 on this bike and see how it goes. So I'll just wait for a pause in the traffic so I can get through, and then we'll see what we do. Okay, so yeah, all right, let's go. 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. All right, so that basically did what it was supposed to. Alright, so as you can see, quite impressive. You can see the amps now are, it's kicking out the amps. I'm glad to see we haven't just started losing chunks of our battery power just because we've been going quite fast for a short amount of time. So as I said, I doubt you're going to get anything like the range that they quoted unless you're literally cruising around at 20 miles an hour. But I would hope it would do a good 55 to 60. If we had this bike longer, we could probably test that theory, but I think it is going on somewhere else shortly. Alright, so I'll just come back when I can show you the regen. Okay, so I'm just coming off here and I'm going to use the regen to slow me down. So I've just let go, and as you can see, 50, 40, and that's pure regen. That's not, I wasn't doing anything on the brakes there. And again, pure regen. Okay, so it is quite an aggressive one, hence I guess why they can, well, I guess why they should say it's configurable. So that is passive regen, as in it's doing it without you doing anything. Then there's obviously what you do if you press the brakes. And there you go, I've also got that bit too. So not many bikes have both types of regen, where the bike just does it because you're coasting, and also you do it when you press the brakes. The only other one that we do that does that is an Ascol, believe it or not. So with Ascols you can actually turn off the passive regen, as in the bike just slows itself down without you doing anything. Possibly there's a way of doing that on this bike, but the manual talks about it, but can't seem to find a way to get into that menu. But as I said, maybe this is another version. You see that I've now lost a second chunk on the range, and that's literally just been us riding it from where we are down the A3 and back. So I suppose that is an indication of what's actually going to be happening in practice. Okay, so what else is there to tell you? Well, as I said, there are things that it doesn't have. No alarm, so you'd need to sort one of those out. No tracking, but obviously you could fit one. You could fit a data tag as well. It will be on the grant, so you're going to get a good guarantee, just like all the other bikes that I've been comparing it to. I mean, I have to say I like it. I mean, there's it's a very interesting experience to ride something so fast that is still not making any noise. In fact, there isn't a bike that goes over 60 that doesn't make any noise around the UK right now. Maybe in some other markets, but TC Max, CR 6, all the zeros, they're all making noise. Relatively, obviously, nothing like a petrol bike, but for a bike that is purely silent, doing 70 plus miles an hour, it's different. Okay, so yeah, you'll need to look into security. There is a steering lock. You've got a lot of front wheel space to do something with. Because the hub motor doesn't fill out the entire rear wheel, you do have the ability to put something through the wheel, unlike lots of other hub motor bikes. So what can I criticise? I guess these mirrors, I like the mirrors actually, I like the position of them. However, you can catch them when you are see Regen's kicking in again. You can catch them when you're reaching for the brake lever, but they are quite good because they're right on the edge of the bike, and therefore sometimes you ride on bikes where the mirrors are not wide enough. The stems are basically not wide enough, so you have to do something about that. Okay, what else can I criticise about it? I mean, it's Chinese. I suppose some people won't like that. It's not a zero, but it's not trying to be. I would be interested to know if they compared a 11 kilowatt zero with this, the 0 to top or 0 to 60 time, because this is a hub motor and zeros are chains. That would be an interesting test for someone to do, but we're not a zero dealer, so it won't be us. Alright, so hopefully I've covered everything. Colours, blue, red or black. Quite a striking blue, as you can see. No storage, I guess, is another criticism, I suppose, if I had to do that. It is meant for two. There is a rear seat for the passenger with pegs, so you can deal with that. But hopefully that will give you some insight into this bike. It will be interesting to see how it's considered when it finally becomes available. We will be taking pre-orders for this bike once we know the schedule for it when it gets released, and hopefully you found that useful. So if you have any questions, then please feel free to contact us either through our YouTube channel of Green-Mopeds or any other way that you wish. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel to get updates. We will do a quick static review just to highlight some of the things about this bike, in particular that rear wheel. And thanks very much.